Hola estudiantes! In this video, I wanted to do a recap of ser and estar. You have learned ser individually and have used it for a lot of different situations, and you have learned estar and have used it for a lot of different situations. But when we come across expressions that could use ser or estar, that's when oftentimes we start having difficulties. So I wanted to give you lots of examples that you can use to determine whether you should be using ser or estar. The general idea is that ser is used for more permanent descriptions and estar is used to describe more temporal states. So I'm going to go through a lot of different ways in which ser, we can conceive it as permanent, even though you could say, but technically I agree with you. A lot of these things are things that could be modified and that change, but we kind of have to think about them as permanent. Okay? So if I were to be discussing characteristics, I would say, for example, if I wanted to say she is a woman, assuming that this is a permanent condition or viewing it as a permanent condition. Ella es mujer. If I were to say something like the sky is blue, that's inherently what the sky is, our perception of it. Okay, I can say el cielo es azul. In those situations, we're going to use the verb ser. And you can think of millions of other descriptions that would satisfy that. Now, if I'm talking about origin, for the most part, we do not modify origin. So I can say, yo soy de Arizona. Notice I am using the verb ser, conjugated in the yo form. Okay? And notice that when I talk about origin, I will use de, to be from. Okay? But if I wanted to describe myself in terms of my origin, if I were to say I am Mexican, I could say soy mexicana. Still using the verb ser. Okay? In this place, I listed the location. In the second example, I made reference to the adjective of origin. In the same way, to describe someone's permanent characteristics, such as their physical permanent characteristics, I would use the verb ser. If I wanted to say something to the effect of Raúl es alto, he is a tall person, so I can use ser. And if I wanted to reference that he is also blonde, es alto y es rubio. Again, in those situations, we are describing a person's permanent characteristics. Therefore, we can also use ser. If I'm describing the material of which something is made, for example, if I say, la silla es de plástico. Nope, I will use the verb ser because it is inherently made of plastic in this case. If I wanted to mention something else, el carro es de metal. Okay? Again, descriptions, inherent, permanent are what we're using. In the same way, a person's personality, for the most part, is conceived as a permanent characteristic, which is why I would say something to the effect of Luis es simpático. This is assuming that we are describing Luis's personality, what he is inherently like, es simpático. I can also describe other qualities and characteristics about Luis. Luis es simpático, or anybody else. Ellos son inteligentes. Again, still using the verb ser to describe these personalities, these characteristics, etc. Possession, because we own things, under the assumption of permanence, will also use the verb ser. So I can say, for example, esa es mi mochila. That is my backpack. That's why I'm using ser. I'm indicating possession as a permanent state. Okay? Even though you might change that state later on by giving it to someone else. We also use it to define elements. I can say, el libro es un recurso importante. So notice how I'm using this. The book is an important resource. I am defining the book as an important resource. Okay? So again, that definition is going to be something that alludes to permanence. The hour, there's only a set amount of hours during the day. We do not change, we cannot keep on adding more hours to the day. So we kind of have to think about it that way so that we can say, okay, so we can point to an hour, but the hours are set. Okay? So at this time, right now, the hour is, whatever it is going to use ser. If you think about it that way, that'll help you get to ser much easier than trying to go the route of estar. So if I were to say, son las 10 de la mañana, that'll use ser right there. And also for generalizations. This one does not go so much into the permanence, more of kind of an opinion. But generalizations, if you are making that generalization, you believe it to be true. So if I were to say, es terrible, or es importante, or es increíble, all of these, it is terrible, it is important, it is incredible, it is, the it will go into ser, and usually the singular ser. Okay. Now for estar. Estar will be used to discuss location. In Spanish we say ubicación. And what you have to consider is that people can move around constantly. And I know that other things can't move around, like a building can't move around and a tree can't move around. But if we think of people, then we generalize that to even inanimate things. So if I were to say, la niña está en la clase, that is a location of something, and that was going to use the verb estar. To express temporal conditions, things that can change. What can change? Our feelings, our mood, our health. All of those things can change. I can say, for example, Sara está triste porque su mamá está enferma. So notice, I'm expressing mood, which can change. I am expressing conditions such as being sick, and those change. Okay? A lot of students go by the rhyme where however you feel, or how does it go? For how you feel and where you are, always use estar. So those would be the two main uses for estar, but remember that you also know that we use estar for the present progressive when things are occurring, and they're going to use estar as its auxiliary verb for its conjugation. So if I say, ella está estudiando en su habitación, this estar estudiando is a present progressive, and you have learned that we're going to use it for estar. We also use it for some expressions of weather. See, if I were to say, está nublado, which makes a lot of sense because we know weather changes so much that we're expressing that condition, that temporal condition. But don't be confused, not all expressions of climate, of weather, are going to use estar. You have learned a lot of other expressions, such as the use of hacer, that will also be used for weather expressions. Now there's a few situations in which you have to decide, am I going to use ser or am I going to use estar? So I wanted to review how that would sound different and what the difference of those would mean. So look at the first two sentences that say Sergio es aburrido and Sergio está aburrido. If I say Sergio es aburrido, that's a permanent condition. Means he is a boring person. So now, because we're using ser, we're talking about his personality. Okay? So in this case, it's personality. But in the second example, Sergio está aburrido, we're using estar. So now we're talking about something temporal, probably how he's feeling right now. So he's bored right now. Do you see the difference between these two? The same can be seen in the next two examples. If I see the sentence, Jacob es nervioso, Jacob está nervioso. If I say Jacob es nervioso, because I'm using ser, that's a personality situation, so he is a nervous person. He gets anxious very easily. Or if I say Sergio está nervioso, because I use estar, that's a temporal condition, which means he is feeling nervous right now. Another example to not use people, if I were to say something like los mangos son verdes versus los mangos están verdes. If I say los mangos son verdes, then that is the characteristic of the mango. The inherent color of mangoes, I'm saying, is green. But if I say los mangos están verdes, I'm expressing the temporal condition of those mangoes. And if they're looking green right now, that probably means they're not ripe. So notice how in some adjective use, ser and estar can both be used. So that's why it becomes important that we know whether we use ser or estar. I hope this helps you out as you're trying to figure out ser estar, because this is something that will continue to be used throughout your Spanish language learning course.